Welcome to Haunted Horizons. To all our Haunted Horizons fans, get ready for a terrifying journey into the unknown. This isn't just a ghost story, it's an experience that will haunt your mind long after the final whisper fades. Tonight, we bring you The Hollow Cry, a bone-chilling tale set in the forgotten halls of Blackthorn Orphanage, where lost souls still cry out for salvation. Dark secrets, eerie whispers, and an unspeakable presence await. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and brace yourself. Will you dare to enter the haunted corridors of Blackthorn? Let the horror begin. The arrival at Blackthorn Orphanage. Nestled deep in the overgrown woods, Blackthorn Orphanage stood as a forgotten relic of sorrow and decay. Abandoned for decades, it was a place where silence spoke louder than words, where shadows moved even when no one was there to cast them. The local villagers refused to go near it, their superstitions whispering of a presence, a ghost that wept through the night, pleading for help no one dared to give. Elias Carter, a documentarian obsessed with lost history, had heard the rumors. He and his team, Madeline Ross, a historian, and David Sloan, their skeptic technician, had come to investigate. They arrived at dusk, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and rot. The front doors groaned as they pushed them open. Inside, dust lay thick over the remains of a life once lived. Rows of broken cribs stood empty, rocking ever so slightly, though no breeze stirred the air. Then came the first whisper. "Help me," soft where desperate, a child's voice. Madeline stopped cold. "Did you hear that?" David scoffed. "Audio distortion. Old buildings make noises." Elias wasn't convinced. He turned on the EVP recorder. "Let's find out." The second encounter. They set up their equipment in what had once been the main nursery. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, faded murals of children playing. A single broken doll lay abandoned in the center of the room. The EVP recorder crackled. Then, through the static, a voice emerged. "Why did you leave me?" Madeline's hands shook. That sounded real." A sudden bang echoed from upstairs. Elias grabbed a flashlight, motioning the others to follow. They ascended the staircase, each step creaking beneath their weight. At the end of the hallway, a door stood ajar. The plaque above it read, "Matron's Office." Inside, old papers littered the desk. Madeline picked up a tattered ledger and flipped through its pages. The last entry was dated October 12th, 1953. "The fever has taken another one. Little Rose is gone. The others whisper that they hear her crying at night. I tell them it's the wind, but I am not so sure." The EVP recorder crackled again. A new voice whispered, barely audible. "I just wanted my doll, the forgotten child." A sudden chill spread through the room. Elias turned, his breath misting in the cold air. Then, something moved in the corner. A figure, small and frail, stepped forward. A little girl. Her dress was tattered, her skin pale as moonlight. Hollow eyes stared up at them, and in her tiny hands she clutched a broken porcelain doll. A tear rolled down her cheek. "Please, help me." The room darkened. Shadows twisted along the walls. The temperature plummeted. David stumbled back. This isn't real." The girl's voice wavered. "They won't let me leave." Elias forced himself to speak. "Who won't let you leave?" The door slammed shut behind them. A chorus of whispers filled the air. Madeline gasped as unseen hands gripped her arms, cold and unyielding. Elias turned the camera to the mirror hanging on the wall. Reflected in its cracked surface stood dozens of children, hollow-eyed, watching. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the voices stopped. The girl in the tattered dress was gone. Elias swallowed hard. "We need to go." They fled the room, racing down the staircase. As they reached the door, a single whisper followed them. "Don't leave me." They burst into the night, gasping for breath. Behind them, Blackthorn Orphanage loomed, silent and waiting. The return to the orphanage. Elias couldn't sleep. The whisper haunted him, weaving through his thoughts like a sorrowful melody. "Don't leave me." The plea rang in his ears long after they had left Blackthorn Orphanage behind. The next morning, he gathered Madeline and David. "We have to go back." David was adamant. "Absolutely not. We barely got out of there." Madeline hesitated. "Elias, we don't know what we're dealing with." "I can't stop thinking about her. That girl, Rose, she needs our help." Despite their reservations, the team returned to the orphanage before nightfall. The air was heavier this time, thick with an unnatural stillness. The moment they stepped inside, the door shut behind them, sealing them in. The secrets beneath the floor. Elias led them back to the nursery. The doll was gone. Madeline scanned the room, her fingers trembling as she reached for an old floorboard. "Something's buried here." David pried it open. Beneath the rotting wood lay a bundle wrapped in faded cloth. When Elias unwrapped it, his breath caught. A tiny skeleton, curled as if in eternal slumber. Then the whispers returned. Louder, urgent. The temperature plummeted. "They locked me away." The girl's voice trembled. "They hurt me. They buried me here." Elias's heart pounded. "Who did this to you?" The shadows in the room deepened. Then, from the darkness, a new voice emerged. A deeper one. Cold. Malicious. "You shouldn't have come back." The entity awakens. A sudden force knocked David backward. Madeline screamed as unseen hands clawed at her. Elias grabbed the remains, his instincts screaming that they had to get out. Now. As they fled, the entity's presence grew stronger, warping the space around them. The walls groaned, the floor trembled. The girl's voice called after them, softer this time. "Take me away, please. Set me free." Elias held onto the remains tightly. The front door burst open, as if the house itself was spitting them out. The moment they crossed the threshold, the weight lifted. Behind them, Blackthorn Orphanage stood silent once more. "What now?" Madeline whispered. Elias stared down at the tiny remains in his hands. "We give her a proper burial. We end this." The ritual of release. Elias, Madeline, and David stood in a clearing just outside the orphanage. The remains of little Rose lay in a shallow grave they had dug beneath an ancient willow tree, the same one that appeared in the orphanage's fading records. According to legend, it was once a place of protection for the children. Madeline read from an old text they had recovered from the matron's office, a burial ritual meant to free spirits bound to a place of torment. The wind howled around them as she spoke. Rest now, lost one, let the earth embrace you. Let the wind carry your sorrow away. Let the darkness release you. For a moment, there was silence. Then the ground trembled. David gasped as a shadow slithered from the orphanage, stretching impossibly long beneath the moonlight. A voice, deep and broken, echoed through the night. She is mine. The entity that had imprisoned Rose refused to let her go. The Dark Keeper, a force unseen, sent Elias flying backward. Madeline dropped the book as icy fingers wrapped around her throat. David scrambled for the shovel, but it was ripped from his grasp and hurled into the darkness. The orphanage groaned as its windows shattered one by one. From the darkness of its broken door frame, a towering figure emerged, its limbs impossibly thin, its face obscured by a shifting black void. "You took her from me," the thing hissed. "Now you take her place." The ground beneath them cracked open, revealing something deeper than mere earth. Blackness, swirling and hungry. Dozens of hands reached up from the abyss, clawing at Elias and the others, trying to drag them down. "We have to finish the ritual," Madeline choked out, struggling against the entity's grip. Elias grabbed the book, his vision blurring. He read the final line: "Be unbound, spirit of sorrow. Walk beyond the veil." A scream tore through the night. The shadows convulsed, the Dark Keeper shrieking in agony. The hands gripping them released, and the ground sealed shut as the entity was wrenched back into the void. A small figure stood before them now, little Rose. Her eyes, once hollow and full of sorrow, now gleamed with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. A warm breeze swept through the clearing, and with it, Rose faded into soft, golden light. The orphanage, once a place of horror, stood silent. No more whispers, no more cries. David fell to his knees, panting. "Is it over?" Elias watched the last of the golden light drift into the stars. For her, yes, but places like this, they never truly rest. The orphanage loomed in the distance, and in the cold night air, a new whisper stirred. "Help me." The orphanage awakens. The whisper that had followed them out of Blackthorn Orphanage never left Elias. Night after night, he dreamt of cold hands reaching for him, of hollow eyes staring from the dark. It wasn't over. He knew it. Then the phone rang. It was Madeline. Her voice was shaking. "Elias, we have to go back." David had disappeared. They returned to the orphanage that same night, only to find the doors standing wide open. The air was thick, unmoving, as if the entire building were holding its breath. A single trail of footprints led inside. David's footprints. They followed them into the depths of the orphanage, through rotting hallways and collapsed ceilings. The deeper they went, the stronger the feeling of being watched became. Then they found the door. It was not there before. It was made of blackened wood, engraved with symbols neither of them recognized. It pulsed as if something behind it was breathing. Madeline reached for the handle. The door opened on its own. The true horror. Inside was a vast chamber that should not exist. Candles flickered along the walls, illuminating rows of tiny beds, each one occupied by a motionless, dust-covered form. Then, one of them sat up. It was David. His eyes were black. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Elias stepped forward. "David!" A grotesque smile stretched across David's face. She never left. The shadows around the room began to move, forming shapes. Children, dozens of them, their faces twisted in anguish. But something else was there too. Something far worse. The Dark Keeper was not gone. It had merely been waiting. The walls cracked, revealing a swirling void of darkness, and from it emerged the Keeper, its limbs unnaturally long, its face shifting between agony and rage. "You freed one," it whispered, "but the others belong to me." The orphaned spirits began to scream. Madeline clutched Elias's arm. "We have to finish it. We have to free them all." Elias held up the book. The final passage had been unread. Madeline began chanting, her voice rising above the wailing spirits. The Dark Keeper recoiled, its shadowy body twisting in agony. David lunged at Elias, his hands clawing, his mouth stretching open in a silent scream. But Elias didn't stop. He read the final words. "Be released. Be remembered. Walk into the light." A burst of white light filled the chamber. The screaming stopped. When the light faded, the orphanage was silent. David lay unconscious on the floor, his eyes normal again. The orphaned spirits stood at the edge of the room, their faces now peaceful. One by one, they faded, their whispers turning into the soft laughter of children, finally at rest. The Dark Keeper let out a final, ear-splitting wail as its body shattered into nothingness. The curse was broken. The final goodbye. They left the orphanage at dawn, the first sunlight Blackthorn had seen in years. The doors, once imposing and unmovable, had rotted into dust. Madeline sighed. It's over. Elias looked back one last time. For now. David, weak but alive, murmured, "Did you hear that?" They froze. A single whisper floated through the morning air. "Thank you." Then, at last, Blackthorn Orphanage fell silent.